This is a type of broken access control. It's where the access control is based on a header that has a very simple value. The title of the lab is Referrer-Based Access Control. Let's take a quick look at the lab guidelines. This lab controls access to certain admin functionality based on the referrer header. We then get some administrator credentials that we can explore the lab with, but the main objective here is vertical privilege escalation here, making use of a regular user Wiener. We want to convert Wiener into an administrator user without making use of the admin login. That's purely for exploration. So without further ado, let's access the lab. So the first step here is to log in as administrator admin, and just to get a feel for how the backend works here, we can see we have an admin panel, and on the admin panel, we have the ability to select various regular users and then upgrade or downgrade their privileges. So let's select Carlos as a test. We'll choose the option upgrade user. And taking a look at Burp Suite, we can see that this is a GET request to /admin roles. And we have two parameters as part of the query string. We have username equals Carlos and action equals upgrade. Now, important for the purposes of this lab is the fact that we have a referrer header on the request. And this simply tells us the referring page for the request. In other words, this request is coming from /admin. So now that we know how the functionality works, let's log in as our regular user, which is going to be Wiener with the password Peter. And we're also going to forward our GET request to /admin roles to the repeater. Now, the main thing that differentiates a request coming from an administrator compared to a request coming from a regular user is simply this session token. So if we grab Wiener's session token, then for all intents and purposes, any repeated requests are now coming from a regular user rather than an administrator. So here is the request in the repeater. We're going to delete the administrator session cookie, and we're going to use the session cookie of a regular user. Now, of course, this request shouldn't work, but the interesting thing is it does. Let's just choose the option send. We get a 302 found response. And aside from the fact that we've upgraded the wrong user, this seems to have worked. Let's try with the user Wiener now as part of the username parameter. Let's send that to the backend. We get a found response. And notice we get the message, congratulations, you solved the lab. So this is one of those labs where it works, but you feel like it shouldn't work. So what exactly just happened? The interesting thing here, if we remove the referrer header, or another way you can simulate this is simply just by visiting this URL in your web browser, it's not going to work. See what happens? We click send, we get unauthorized response. Now that unauthorized response clearly has nothing to do with our session cookie. It actually has something to do with this referrer header. When we put the referrer header back in, choose send, the request is authenticated. It works. So what's happening here? The developer has attempted some security here. And let's just go through the logic, the flawed logic that the web developer is potentially using here. The logic is that if a user has come from the administrator page, if this GET request to the backend originates from a /admin page, then it must come from an administrator. That's because only admins can access the administrator page. And for the most part, that's true. We can't access the administrator page if we're not an admin. So you can see why the logic seems to make sense. If this request comes from admin page, only admins can access the admin page, then the request itself must be from an administrator. But here's the problem. The referrer header, it's just a header that anyone can change. Are we on the admin page right now? No, we're not. Can we access the admin page as a regular user? No. Can we simply add a header to our HTTP request that implies we've come from the admin page, even though we really didn't? Yes, we can. And that's the problem with the security logic here. You actually don't need to have originated from a certain location in order to add a header to your HTTP request that says you came from that location. In other words, we're just barefaced lying to the back end here. Yeah, sure, we came from /admin, why not? That's exactly where I just came from. So what is the lesson here? I often find that the lesson for a lot of these broken access control labs is the same. Just authenticate the request in the same way that everyone else does. Have a username and password, which generates a session token. That session token is then used to authenticate the request. there's no point having a session token if we're then going to authenticate the request via a referrer header or any other arbitrary piece of data. The session token, its purpose is to provide security, so let's use it for that purpose. What should have happened here on the back end is the back end doesn't care what the referrer header is. The back end just says, are you an administrator according to your session token? And if the answer is no, we're not going to do anything on the back end because you're not an administrator. Really, really simple. Stick to standard, proven security methods for authentication on the back end. Make use of that session token. All right, hope it was helpful. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Catch you in the next lab.